Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Please take your seats and fasten your seatbelts.
Flight crew, please prepare for takeoff.
Flight 229, you're clear for departure.
Thank you and enjoy your flight.
Hello, everyone. My name is Graham Mann, and this is the Business Aviation Podcast. On this podcast, we interview business aviation professionals with all sorts of backgrounds to learn about experiences, tips, and best practices to be successful. This episode's guest is Zach Ungerleider, who is currently Aftermarket Sales Manager at Textron Aviation. Zach is a graduate of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University with a Bachelors of Science in Aviation Business Administration and is currently studying for his MBA. He's a private pilot with instrument rating, as well as a certified airframe and powerplant mechanic. He's worked in various aspects of aviation maintenance and service for his whole career. On this podcast, we talk about his persistence in getting into the aviation industry, why he's pursued his education despite being extremely busy, and his love for flying remote control planes and modifying muscle cars. Please make sure to check out the show notes for details and links from the conversation at leansystems.co/podcast. Please enjoy this episode with Zach Ungerleider. Hey, Zach, thanks for coming on today.
Hi, how are you?
So I want to start, as I was putting together the plan kind of for this interview and reading your bio, it became clear that you absolutely love all things aviation. We'll talk about all of it more in detail, but your current work, your work as an A&P mechanic, private pilot credentials, flying RC planes. Obviously, you love aviation. When did that start?
So, as far back as I can remember, I've been in love with airplanes. My mom tells me my second word was jet. She took me to see Top Gun in 1985 in the movie theater. I probably just dated myself, but I can remember sitting in the movie theater watching the F-14s taking off in the opening scenes of that movie. And then when the afterburners fired up and the airplane started launching off the deck, it was, I don't really have the words to describe what it did to me in my soul, but even as a child, it just energized me. And the only thing I could think about was flying a fighter jet and being a fighter pilot. And the next grade year, when I was in second grade, I found out that I had bad vision. And that pretty much stopped that in its tracks. You know, my idea of being a fighter pilot was pretty much going by the wayside as soon as I found that out. And I saw that movie Little Miss Sunshine where the kid finds out he can't fly and, you know, because he has bad vision. And that reminded me so much of that moment for me because it kind of destroyed me. I didn't know what I was going to do. So, but as I continued to grow older, when I turned 12, my dad bought me a remote controlled airplane. And after many wrecks and trials and tribulations of that hobby, I eventually became good at it. And, I got through high school and went to college and originally majored in business. And I was trying to find my way into some sort of aviation career. And after a semester of business classes, I was bored to death and went to A&P school and got through about 9 months of general and power plant. And then they had a flight school there. And I ended up doing a discovery flight for about 30 minutes and they let me, sit in the left seat. And I was over the moon. I had to find a way to go fly. So I went to Fort Worth Meacham International Airport and went to a very small flight school and flew some planes that were very much older than I was. And I received my private pilot's license in March of 2001. And then September 11th happened and I was well into studying for my instrument rating. So obviously that changed my course pretty dramatically. I had to go back to school and start working on my degree. And so I decided to pursue a major in aerospace engineering, moved to Daytona Beach, went to Embry-Riddle. We had my wife's father passed away, right before we moved down there and right before we got married. So they had a family business and we were about almost a year living at Daytona Beach. And our mother called me and said, "Hey, I need you to come home and take over the business." So I said, okay. And we ended our lease in Florida and moved back to Fort Worth. And I ran that business for about 3 years. And while I was working at the shop and running it, I was also applying at Lockheed. And at the time, I only had a private pilot's license, and I was doing anything I can. I even told them, look, I'll sweep the floor if I have to, just to prove that I'm worthy of being in this industry. And they wouldn't even interview me. And so a couple years later, I met my mentor, who was a mechanic. He owned a mechanic shop at Meacham Airport. Just kind of by chance that I came across him and told him my story, told him how much I loved airplanes, that I've always wanted a career in aviation, and that's all I've ever wanted to do my entire life. And he gave me my chance. At the time, I was pretty well into my degree at that point. I was back to doing business, but it was an Embry-Riddle, so it was all aviation based. So I was able to stay engaged because it was all curriculum that was centered around aviation. And I started working on doing my sign off for my Airframe Powerplant license. My first day in the shop, I was working on a Citation 10 and installing a SATCOM. And then that afternoon, I pulled the nose landing gear out of a King Air 200, and the rest is history. I spent the next 30 months working there. And sorry, there's a fighter jet flying over my house right now, so kind of exciting. But
background for the conversation.
Long story short, I ended up working at Jet Tech at Meacham Airport as an A&P mechanic. I got my sign off, and through that experience, I met a lot of great people and started doing my instrument rating again. And in 2014, I completed my instrument rating, my airframe powerplant license, and my bachelor's degree all in the same year. I have done my entire life basically centers and focuses on airplanes. It's just, I live it, I breathe it, I eat it. It's everything to me. I was fortunate enough to come across some opportunities at Cessna in 2015. I applied for 4 positions, ended up being interviewed for maintenance engineering, and they were kind enough to hire me into engineering. And I got to put my stamp on our maintenance manual and wrote our corrosion prevention control program. And now I'm in sales with Textron Aviation, and I just absolutely love my job. It's just an amazing experience.
Yeah, that's quite a path through a variety of different things. So, I mean, maybe we'll start. You got your private pilot license back in 2001. How old were you when you got it?
20 years old.
Yeah. So, and then after that, you went off to Embry-Riddle. Was that the next thing?
Yeah, I had to spend a little time at community college just to kind of get some basics done. I went to Tarrant County College for a little while. I did some little intro to engineering there, a lot of chemistry, physics. And then, finally satisfied the requirements to get accepted to the aerospace engineering program at Embry-Riddle. Took a little while. It was pretty difficult, but they let me in finally. And, but yeah, September 11th really, it affected my trajectory. I mean, pretty bad. So, I was fully prepared to go the whole pilot route, and I was destined to be an airline pilot, because if I can't fly fighter jets, I'm going to fly airplanes one way or the other. So that was where I was headed, and it just didn't work out that way.
Right. And I mean, you went off Embry-Riddle, and then as you said, you kind of had to come back and run your wife's dad's shop. This was a mechanic shop, right?
Yep. So they originally just they were open since 1978, and they only did exhaust work and mufflers and stuff like that. And I took over and realized very quickly that that business was kind of dying. So I kind of diversified the business. I was really heavy into muscle cars, and so I started doing performance upgrades on Camaros and Trans Ams, building motors, installing nitrous kits, head and cam swaps and stuff like that. And I was really heavy into the drag racing here in Dallas Fort Worth. And it was a lot of fun, but it was never what I wanted to do for my career. So I was only doing it just to keep my wife's family's legacy alive.
Right. And I mean, that's interesting. You brought it up, your interest in muscle cars, but I mean, did you have much experience with running a business or mechanics, duties and so on before moving into that position?
Not really. I was kind of just thrust into it by default, and I kind of had to learn on the fly. I'll never forget my first day where I'd been teaching myself in the back how to weld, and I threw myself into it, with just the first job of the week, and I just had to wing it and learn as I went. And there was a bit of a learning curve there, but I did what had to be done, and I made it through the recession, I was very proud of myself for doing that. If we hadn't diversified the business into doing performance work and other things, we probably would have had to close down a lot earlier. 2008, 2009 were some very tough years, as everybody knows. And I just had to teach myself, and that's what I did. And I actually got pretty good at welding, and I started doing car show work. So guys would bring their, 69 Camaro or whatever car they had. And I would do mandrel bent, stainless steel exhaust systems for them. And if they wanted, a performance upgrade or something like that, I would do that for them as well. So it was very difficult to learn how to do something. And, I'd worked on cars, and when I was at Embry-Riddle, I was a part of the Muscle Car Association there. And the guys, they would have projects going, and I would go over there and help them with their projects. And I had a Trans Am Firehawk. It was a 2000 model. And we put nitrous on it. And we did long tube headers and all this other stuff. And so I'd had some experience doing that with my own car, and just kind of took that to the bank and started doing it for my customers. And it became pretty successful. But what I found is that deep inside my heart, my soul, it wasn't where I wanted to be. I liked doing it as a hobby, but as a career, it just wasn't where my heart was. And, so I kept applying at Lockheed, and I probably had 30 applications into them, and they just wouldn't even talk to me. So it was a bit disheartening, and it took a lot of determination to kind of dig myself out of that mental hole that I was in,
Yeah, no, I mean, I find it fascinating, just the fact that you got thrust into that role, basically, which was running a business. And as you said, you had some knowledge of it from your own stuff, but, it's a fairly technical job. And, running the business side of things too is also a totally separate challenge. Trying to, everything that goes with running a business, from managing a team to, the other roles that a general manager / owner would have. It's just impressive. I'm impressed that you jumped into it and learned all that stuff on the job. And as you said, got through the recession.
Yeah. I never hired or fired anyone up until that point. And the guy who was running the business when we moved to Florida, I had to unfortunately let him go. And that was a kind of an eye-opening experience to be on the other side of the table. I'd never been fired before, and I had to kind of be that guy, and it was different, but I learned a lot from that experience. Being at the helm of a very small business like that, being an entrepreneur and trying to innovate and do something different, that wasn't really here. It was a tough spot to be in. My mother-in-law didn't really want to let go of the reins, so I was kind of blindly leading this business, and that made it even more difficult. But ultimately, I just couldn't let go of the draw of aviation. I had to do something to get around airplanes. That was my goal. So
right, yeah. So you mentioned that you'd put out a ton of applications. You'd applied to Lockheed. You wanted to get back into aviation however you could. Maybe just go into a little more detail about that whole application process and how you eventually got your first sort of start back in aviation.
Well, so, Lockheed, the way that their process is, and this is no fault of theirs, but it's basically done by the keywords in your resume. So at the time, my resume was, in all honesty, I had a private pilot's license with about 60 or 70 flight hours. I didn't have my bachelor's degree yet. I was still, so on paper, I didn't look like I was qualified to even sweep the floor out there, I guess. And so the computer system, I don't even think was putting my resume in the hiring manager's face. So, I would just apply for any job I could find out there, and just never got a call back. And it was very disheartening. I spent a lot of time lamenting to my wife, just not understanding why they wouldn't even just give me an opportunity. I knew tons of people that worked there, and they tried to help me get through, and nothing. So ultimately, when I finally met my mentor, Rod Techmeyer, he gave me my shot. I explained to him kind of my love for aviation, the fact that I've always wanted to work around airplanes. I told him, I said, I'm working on my degree. I'm probably going to work on my commercial pilot's license and my instrument rating. And I want to just go as far as I can and be a sponge and learn as much as I possibly can. And he allowed me the freedom to be able to come into the shop and work as a mechanic. And then if I needed to go fly with somebody, or if I needed to go do flight training, or if I had a final or something like that, he was extraordinarily flexible. He mentored me in ways that I don't know I would have gotten from anyone else. He taught me as much as he possibly could. And he'd let me go out on engine runs and go on test flights and all kinds of things. So I got a lot of exposure to things that I think a lot of people as an apprentice mechanic don't get. When a recip airplane, a prop plane came in, I was kind of in charge of that inspection. I got to go take the airplanes and go run them and go up with the pilot and fly and do a high-speed taxi down the runway. And for me, it didn't matter how much money I made. I was so happy and in my element. It just made my soul just feel positive and happy. And so I was energetic and passionate, and there was nothing to compare with that feeling. I'm sitting here thinking, I'm not making the greatest of money right now, but I'm so ridiculously happy because I get to go into work every day and I get to turn on the master battery switch of an airplane. I get to, fiddle with all the avionics and test the autopilot and do all this stuff. And it just made me a happier person. It showed me that this is really the place where I needed to be. Through that experience of working at that shop, I learned more than I could have possibly imagined. I got experience on 36 different types of corporate aircraft. I had exposure to many different, manufacturers, airplanes, maintenance manuals, procedures. And before the end of it, when I went to go do my A&P and my oral and practical, it was like another day at the hangar. I mean, it was pretty, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it was definitely, I was more prepared for it by doing my Airframe Powerplant through sign off because of that experience.
Right. No, I think that's fantastic. A lot of people look for that their whole lives and never find it. So,
yes,
you finding it early
absolutely
is amazing. How did you meet Rod, your mentor? So
his daughter was friends with one of my best friends, and they'd come over to the house one night, and I was sitting out on the front porch out there talking to her at the house, and I kind of told her the same story. I said, I've always wanted to work in aviation, and at the time I had no idea who her dad was, and I was like, I'm running this shop, and she asked me, so what do you think you're going to end up doing? I have no idea. I'm just going to keep running this shop until I find my way into an aviation job. And she said, well, my dad has a maintenance shop at Meacham. And I said, really? Wish I'd have known that a couple of years ago, because I'd known her for a while. And she said, yeah, I'll call him and see if he's willing to meet with you, and maybe you can go sit and talk with him. So that's how that all started, just purely by chance.
Huh. And so you went and sat and talked with them. Was there anything in specific that you think made the difference in terms of selling yourself and letting him take a shot on that?
I think he saw my love for aviation. I think he saw at that point, I wasn't desperate, but I was so desperate to get into aviation. And I told him about applying at Lockheed. I told him, I just want to work around airplanes. That's all I want. I don't want anything else for my career. I want to find my way in. And I think that was it. Rod is a very kind individual. He knows that, somebody helped him get where he is. And I think he fosters that mentality by, hiring individuals who want to learn, who want to gain their certification, and then kind of grooming them along the way and helping him get to that path. And that's exactly what he did for me. And I would only imagine that it's due to the fact that, he saw how much I loved it, how much I wanted to be there, and my drive and desire to be in aviation. And that's what helped push him to say, yeah, come work for me. So that's my best guess.
Yeah. Often passion is a pretty good way to sell something. So
yep.
you were there for 3.5 years. At the same time, were you still studying?
I was working on classes. I'd probably take 2 at a time. It accelerated when I got closer to graduating. I started taking as many classes as I could handle. So it's kind of crazy. I was working 3 jobs. I was bartending on the weekends. I was working as an A&P mechanic. And then I was also, this is kind of crazy, but I ended up becoming director of maintenance. Once I got my airframe and powerplant license, I got hired as director of maintenance for another company I was flying with to build my time. So I got really lucky. That was by chance too. So I was in the shop one day and I had one of my remote control airplanes sitting by my box because I had brought it up there to show some of the guys. And this gentleman became my pilot mentor. He was walking through the shop. One of their Citation 10s was in there, and he saw my remote control jet, and he stopped and he said, "Hey, what do you got there?" And I was like, "Oh, that's just my electric ducted fan F-18." And he's like, "Oh, that's really cool." He's like, "You fly remote controlled airplanes?" I was like, "Yeah, I've been doing it since I was 12." And really, I said I've been wrecking them since I was 12 because that's what I had been doing. Because it's a very tough hobby. And so through that conversation, he got to know me, and we were doing a phase 1 through 4 on one of the King Air 90s that he flew. And when we were finishing up, he asked me, he said, "Hey, do you want to ride right seat? I know you have a pilot's license. If you'd like to come along, you're welcome to join me." And I mean, of course, I said, absolutely. And so I got my first ride in the King Air 90 with him and got to know him on a little bit better of a personal level. And then he kind of became my pilot mentor. And then every time they had an opportunity for me to sit in the right seat, they threw me in there. As long as it was single pilot aircraft, I was able to do so. And so when they flew the 501 or the King Air 90 or the 200, I'd hop in the seat, run the radios, and every once in a while get to fly the airplane in the left seat on an empty leg, and it just became an amazing experience. And through that, once I achieved my airframe and powerplant license, they then asked me to become the director of maintenance for their Part 91 operations, just to kind of oversee the maintenance operations in the shop. Since I was already working on their airplanes, it just kind of logically made sense. So I acted as director of maintenance. I was bartending on the weekends, which is kind of a weird combination. And then I was a mechanic at Jet Tech as well. And I was going to school for my A&P or for my bachelor's degree. In 2014, I was actually finishing my bachelor's degree. I was studying for my airframe powerplant, written and oral and practical. I was doing my instrument rating. I was flying trips, acting director of maintenance. I was bartending still on the weekends whenever I could. And I have 2 children and a wife at the same time. So 2014 was probably one of the craziest years of my life. I had no time for anything fun. It was just fly, study, work, rinse, repeat. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah, that definitely sounds insane. I mean, did you have a family at this point as well?
Oh yeah, I had 2 boys, and my wife. My wife and I have been together as of this May. It'll be 22 years, and we were at that point we had been married for 7 years, and we had just been, she was supporting me. She was a teacher at the time, so whatever I was doing, she was kind of helping out in the background, taking care of the boys whenever she could, and I would, vice versa. It was a 2014 was a for sure struggle. I still don't know how I got through it, but I did.
I mean, did you consciously manage your time in a specific way to accomplish all those things, or it was just kind of do what you can while you could do it?
So I had a system down. So what I would do is I would go into, work in the morning at 8. Throughout the course of the day, there may be director of maintenance duties I would have to, take care of. So maybe I would have to go out and go check an airplane after it came back in, or go service an airplane before it goes out. And then I would perform my duties at work as an A&P mechanic with Rod. And then once work was over for the day, it was usually about 4:00. I would the flight school was right next to the hangar I worked at. And so I would go over there and go do an instrument flight for an hour or 2. and then go spend a little bit of time with my family, have a little dinner. And then I would go up to the Pancake House here in Fort Worth and literally study till probably 2 or 3 in the morning, whether it be for my degree or for A&P writtens. And I did this for good, I don't know, it was probably 6 months straight where I was up there almost every night. And then I'd wake back up at 7 in the morning, go back to work at 8. And so I usually ran, and I think that year I ran on about 3.5, 4 hours of sleep on average every night.
And then on the weekends, just because you were getting a little too much sleep, you were bartending.
That was kind of like the little bit of fun money I had. It's like I go 10 bar on a Friday and Saturday night. And usually Friday nights, I was a zombie by the time we closed, just because I had worked, all day in the shop or the hangar, and then went to the bar to go, make a little bit more money. So Sundays were kind of my day to either get caught up on school or try to relax, which normally there was no relax. It was always, get caught up on the rest of the week. So it was pretty bad.
Wow. That is a busy period of time.
Yes.
You kept up the school the whole way sort of through whatever you were doing. What was the motivation for that?
So my entire life, my family has always pushed me to achieve a bachelor's degree. And after I got my A&P, I was so far into it. It was like, I need to just finish this. And I really didn't know what the benefits were going to be of having it. I just knew that I'd been told my entire life that I had to have a degree, and that in my entire life, I always wanted to go to Embry-Riddle because it was an aviation school. It had nothing to do with prestige or anything like that. I just know that from the way that my mind worked, I needed to have aviation built into the curriculum if I was going to be successful. And it was hard at times. There were a lot of times when I wanted to give up because, I've got 40 hours remaining, the light's at the end of the tunnel, but that tunnel's really far away, and so it was really tough to keep going. But I think at a certain point when you get enough college hours, you just have to just finish it because you've made it this far. You might as well keep going, So we ended up, my wife continued to motivate me. My family supported me. My dad helped me whenever I needed it. And just eventually, plowed through it and got it done. Oddly enough, I'm back in school again. So
I was going to say you're back for more now.
Yeah, that's actually the plan for tonight. I got to go back to the Pancake House and do more studying. So, let's
talk about that a little bit. You're studying for your MBA now?
Yes, I'm doing back at Embry-Riddle, MBA with a leadership specialization. Obviously now that I work at Textron Aviation, they help take care of that cost for me. So I'm in my second class right now. I'm taking strategic management and marketing, and so far so good. Things are going really well with that, and I've got another 27 hours left, and then I'll have my MBA. It seems like a long way away, but our terms are pretty short. We have 9-week classes, so I should be able to knock it out in a reasonable time.
Right. And what was the motivation for going back and doing the MBA?
I can't decide whether it's insanity or just career progression. I think it's probably a combination of both, to be honest with you. I realized early in my career at Textron that if I had any ideas of moving up, from where I was going, that it was going to have to require a graduate degree. And I originally started a master's degree in unmanned systems since I fly remote controlled airplanes, and everybody's in this huge uproar about drones and everything. I kind of figured, well, why don't I get an unmanned systems master's? Well, shortly after getting out of engineering, I ended up in sales and realized, wait, that unmanned systems master's isn't going to really do a whole lot for me. So I need to go actually to MBA track. And to be honest with you, the curriculum that I'm taking, the stuff I'm learning is very pertinent to what I do now. So it's just more relevant, I think. And, I want to have it so that this will be the end of my formal education. I will not be getting a PhD, just so you know. It's not going to happen. But the way that I see it is this is the end of my formal education. And there's really nothing else for me, as far as, my career and the need for further education. So at least from a university. So,
right.
I just wanted to kind of finish it off with that,
Yeah. So you just mentioned your current role at Textron, but you mentioned that this opportunity came up and back in 2015, you made the move from Jet Tech to Textron. Tell me a little bit about the decision to make that change and then that first position you were in at Textron.
So I had been applying once I got my Airframe Powerplant license. I had, my application and resume started going out to everybody. I had interviews with Bombardier, Gulfstream. I had a couple offers from, other MROs around the country. And everybody that was offering me jobs, it was just to be a mechanic, and that was not where I saw myself in 5-10 years. And that question came up during interviews. They're like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I mean, I think one time I even answered, I see myself sitting in the chair you're in. And people that interview don't really like that too much.
I was going to say that's a bold answer, but I want to take your job. Might not.
It was just more of a, I'm getting a degree. I'm getting a commercial pilot's license. There's going to be more for me than just turning a wrench. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I just saw more for myself. And I also thought to myself, why did I take out all these student loans if I'm not going to use that piece of paper that I'm going after? So I really kind of held out for a while. I continued to work at Jet Tech. I went on interviews and I did phone interviews and stuff. But once I finished my degree, then of course the Lockheed thing came back up, and one of my friends had, pretty much gotten an interview set up for me. And then I had applied for these 4 positions with Cessna. And I asked my wife just on a whim one night, I said, hey, what do you think about Wichita, Kansas? And she's like, I've been up there. It's not bad. Yeah, that's fine. And I said, okay. And I don't think she was really thinking like that it was going to happen. And so I applied for 2 business development positions. And then one was a flight simulator support and the other was maintenance engineering. And the first interview I did was with the flight simulator support manager. And my first manager at Cessna who hired me in, he was sitting in on that interview. And before the interview even started, they had already called me to set up the second interview for the engineering job. So first interview went well, but towards the end, the engineering manager started asking me a bunch of questions. And then before I knew it, I had kind of already figured out like this second interview, I knew how it was going to go. And that's exactly how it went. I got into the second interview and they were trying to talk me into Wichita. Hey, when can you come up here? And I told them, I said, well, I actually almost drove up here for this interview because, I felt so good about the first one. I almost wished it would happen in person. And so through that conversation, they actually wanted me to come up and take a tour of the factory and meet the guys in the office. And, they asked me kind of if I was more interested in doing, they had a corrosion prevention control program they were wanting to rewrite. And it was kind of going to take the company in a different direction when it came to corrosion. And I had that, or I could do MSG3 analysis. And I chose the corrosion prevention control program because I felt like it was something that would differentiate me a little bit. If I just went to do an MSG3, then, I would be doing everything that everyone else is doing. And I wanted to do something that I could put my name on and be proud of. And so I eventually I went up there and took my wife with me and we did a tour of the facility. And I was just, I was in heaven. It was like going to Disney World for me. I mean, I'm walking through this facility. I'm in the factory and I'm seeing the Citation 10 being built. I'm seeing the Latitude. I'm seeing the Sovereigns. And my wife she's laughing at me because I'm just drooling all over this. And, the manager's telling me all this stuff and I'm just so excited. And at the end of that, I was told, you're probably going to receive an offer next week. And I said, well, bring it on because I'm ready. And, sure enough, the next week they gave me an offer and my wife and I talked about it for all of about 10 minutes and I accepted it. And then I think it was probably a month later, we moved up there or I moved up there by myself. My wife was a teacher here in Fort Worth at the time. And so she couldn't leave until her contract was up. So she stayed behind with the boys and finished out her contract. Then I moved them up in June of 2015. So it was pretty crazy to truck my car up there, and I had to stay with a friend for a little while temporarily just to kind of have a place to live and until my family got up there. And it was a little weird. I was going back as much as I possibly could to see them, and then we ended up building a house up there and kind of got settled in. And I did in maintenance engineering. I wrote our corrosion prevention control program. So I went through and provided provided a mechanic's perspective to an engineering document, if that makes any sense. So our original CPCP was written kind of by an engineer, so it wasn't very friendly to the guy who's sitting there on the shop floor reading this material, saying, "I don't even understand what they're saying." So right. What they wanted someone who had performed the inspections to rewrite this to where it was mechanic friendly, and the people reading it could really interpret it the way it was supposed to be interpreted. So I did that. They cross-trained me with MSG3, so I did do some MSG3 analysis on the latitude, the Citation 10, and the Sovereign. And I got a lot of really good experience. I wrote our wash procedures for all Citation aircraft. So some people haven't been too happy with that because it's increased the intervals on the airplane, but we also made it discretionary. So I was really proud of that because we were able to give people a little bit of a flexible procedure instead of it being so rigid like it was before. So that was kind of cool.
Right.
So I did that for a year, and then I kind of completed everything they hired me to do, and then it was we have a reduction in force, and we'd like to keep you here at the company, but we have 2 positions that you can choose from. And you can do inspection on the shop floor, which I had just done for 4 years, so that
right.
really wasn't something I was interested in. And they had me schedule one of the small cabin maintenance bays in the service center. So I did that for about 3 months, but they gave me the opportunity to look for another job at the same time. And so I came across one of the directors for program sales. And, programs are extraordinarily complicated. You're paying per hour for certain coverages. And I took that job and fell in love with it. I never sold anything before in my life except for a bottle of wine when I was waiting tables and bartending. So that was a little bit different for me, but it ended up being just a complete blessing. Sales has just it's been phenomenal. Like I don't know that I can ever go back to anything else, to be honest with you. So,
All right. Well, I want to revisit that, but I do want to ask, so you said the interviews early on went well. How many interviews do you think you did before the Textron ones?
Probably a good 15. I had a lot of recruiters that were trying to, they had my resume and they were setting me up with all these interviews with different people. So I had probably a good 15 interviews before I ended up talking to Textron.
Right. And did you have any strategies for improving how those interviews went?
Yeah, I learned from every single one of them. Some of them were highly technical where I'm being asked what hydraulic pump is installed on which airplane. And then I had others that were, where do you see yourself? And those kind of typical interview questions. At a certain point, I think I ended up just kind of saying, you know what, this is me. If they don't like it, then I don't want to work for them. And so I started exerting myself and just, this is who I am, take it or leave it. I think after you interview that many times with that many different people, you just get to a point where you're just like, look, this is who I am. If you want me, awesome. And if not, that's great too. Because what I found is through the interview process, I was interviewing them just as much as they were interviewing me. And in some cases, I had recruiters call me afterwards and I'm like, no, I don't want to work for them. And it wasn't anything personal. It's just, you can tell when it's not a good fit, And so my strategy kind of became, I'm going to see, what happens when I get my degree. I'm going to see what happens and who I talk to and what they offer and what's best for my family. So the strategy was really just make sure that it's the right fit for myself and the 3 other individuals that I had to care for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that sort of becoming more authentic in the interviews kind of, as you said, helps ensure there's a good fit both ways too.
Yep.
As opposed to trying to just get every position kind of thing.
Yep. Absolutely.
So you mentioned there was a big change, obviously, when you shifted to sales at Textron, but you obviously really enjoy it. What were the changes, and how did you adapt or learn those new skills?
So I went from being in a cubicle, writing maintenance manual procedures, and having to get out, having to walk around the service center just to interact with people, to being thrust into traveling, meeting new customers that I had to go from being an introverted, like kind of quiet guy to having to go talk to people I didn't know, having to be not afraid to go, say hello to people and talk to them about their airplanes. And it really was a massive personality change for me because I had to go just outside of myself. And it was something I wasn't used to, I mean, as a mechanic, in a lot of cases you can throw in your earbuds and go work on the airplane. As a bartender, I had that skill because I was used to that, but I had very much conditioned myself through being a mechanic and through being in engineering that, I was used to being in my own head. I was used to just talking to the people that I was comfortable with and familiar. So I think the biggest change that I felt was just having to come out of my comfort zone and really embracing the idea of approaching these people that I'd never met before. And I have no idea who they are. And now it's just second nature. It's just the way life is, but I think that was the biggest change that I felt.
And did you have any training or mentorship in terms of making that shift, or was there other ways you learned, or you already had the skill set, you just had to turn it on in this context?
I would say kind of yes and no to that answer. The guys that were already program sales managers, they helped me a little bit as far as understanding the processes, what they do. I would ask questions like, "Hey, how do you approach a customer about this?" Or how do you start off the conversation here? Or, things like that. And so that was definitely helpful. But honestly, I think being a bartender all those years, it definitely helped me to overcome a lot of those fears. So, I did get used to talking to people when they come sit at the bar. In a lot of cases, there was a lot of alcohol involved. So people tend to open up a lot more when that happens. But I honestly feel like I had to turn it on, but I also had to get direction from people I was, working with and who had already done that role for many years,
Right. So, I mean, there's obviously lots of things that were different about that job. Were there skills that you held over from, maintenance positions or other positions earlier in your career that now help in that position?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that has helped me be successful in sales is that the knowledge I gained from being an A&P mechanic, the knowledge I gained from flying right seat in the citations, the experience of doing all those things and working on multiple models, it really did prepare me for being in a sales role where, what I've found in sales is that you're finding solutions to your customers' issues. So your customer has a problem, they've run into a technical issue with the airplane. The better that you can solve it, the more trust you're gaining with them. And that's what I want to do. I want to gain their trust because I'm not going to break it. I'm honest and transparent. I never lie. I don't ever, tell anybody something that I don't know to be 100%. And I feel like those experiences that I had in the past really did help me become a more successful sales manager.
Yeah, certainly. I'm sure that knowledge allows you to assess problems much more effectively.
Absolutely.
Do you find in any of your current positions that early experience running the garage helped as well? Are any of those skills transferable?
Yeah, I would say they are. When I ran the shop, I was very much the center point of contact. Obviously being the owner, the general manager, it was, I handled all the parts ordering. I handled all the, customer quoting, all of that stuff. So I do feel like that was helpful. Understanding how that business worked definitely gives me a little bit better perspective as to why I'm being told certain things from my upper level management. So in the regard of being able to take direction from the people above me and understanding the business purpose behind those decisions has definitely been it's been more helpful. There's obviously a vast difference between an aircraft manufacturer and a muffler shop, but there were similarities in the regard that, I still have to understand the profit and loss. I still need to understand, why we need to make a certain margin and all those good things. So I definitely feel like, it did prep me in some way or another to be better in this role.
Right. So you're studying your MBA while you're working now, and you also serve as a business mentor on the NBAA Young Professionals Council, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tell me a little bit about the council and why you decided to participate.
So the council it's an amazing organization. I joined the council early in 2018, and how I got on the council is I became friends with one of the girls that was on the council, and I told her, I said, hey, I'd really like to give back to the industry that's given me so much. Somebody helped me get where I'm at, and I would really like to be able to pass that on to someone else. And so she's like, well, I can talk to the council and see if they're interested in having you. Well, it turned out they wanted somebody that represented the OEMs. And, obviously I was ready and willing to do so. So I put in my resume, and they accepted me, and I had to get approval from my upper leadership, and they agreed that it would be fine. And so the NBAA Young Professionals Council, we are 5 years in and growing very rapidly. The top 40 under 40 obviously has given us a ton of exposure as of last year. We've gotten a ton of nominations already this year. And, I think the idea behind it is to get people not only involved and connected with each other, but to give younger individuals who are coming into the industry someone that they can talk to. My mentors were great at teaching me technical things and teaching me about the airplane or how to fly the airplane or what does what. But there was really no one to help guide me in my career. Like, do I make this decision? Do I do this? Do I do that? There was no one there to help me do that. And so a lot of what I did was kind of almost trial and error. It's like, well, I think I can go this way, but I don't know if I should, and there was no one to really bounce those ideas off of. And so I think that's a big part of what the mentorship is about is giving you that resource and saying, hey, this person is here for you to help you make good decisions for your career. This person is there to help you in any way possible to help you navigate this highly complicated, coveted industry. And so far, it's been amazing. I actually had a phone call 2 nights ago with a gentleman who's moving down here. He's, obviously younger. He interned at our company. And now he's pursuing a professional pilot track, and he needs a mentor. He needs somebody to help him understand how to navigate some of these decisions and give him the real story, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of schools out there saying, oh, if you do this and you pay us this money, you're going to make this much money. And when you get out there and you're going to do these great things. And then they get out there and do it. And they've taken out all these loans only to find out that, the grass really isn't as green as they thought it was going to be. And so I think part of being a mentor is providing that reality to people who are going through this and saying, hey, listen, this is how it is. This is what you need to do. This is what is best for you. Make your own decisions, but this is my advisement. It's just not only is it good for your networking, but it's also great to help those younger individuals say, hey, listen, I think you should do this. This is why. These are the reasons. Think about it. Tell me what you think. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I wish they'd had it when I was younger. I think it would have been very beneficial for me when I was going through all this on my own. But in this capacity, I want to give back. I want to help others figure out how they can achieve their dream, if it's the same as mine or different. But if it's getting into business aviation, I want to help them do that. Obviously, I think us on the council, we do tend to spread ourselves thin a lot because we want to be involved in everything we possibly can. So that's why the NBAA mentoring program is kind of, they assign a mentee to you and then you mentor those individuals. My mentoring capacity has mostly been internally in the company. We've hired a tremendous amount of younger people coming out of college. They go through a sales development program where they spend a year-long rotation going through different business units in the company. And then they learn about our products, they learn about our processes, and they work, hand in hand with us. And then we put them in positions based upon their performance in that program. So I can't tell you how many times when I was in Wichita, they'd sit me down in a room full of interns and say, "Hey, teach them about the Hawker," and it's a little difficult to teach a bunch of kids out of college about a Hawker because it's not exactly the most friendly airplane in the world. But I did it and I enjoyed it, and so I wanted to be able to do that on a bigger scale, and I wanted to do that for people that weren't just in my organization, and it. So far, so good. I think the YoPro Council has a big future ahead of it. Unfortunately, because of my age, I've got about 2 years left, and then I got to move on to something different. But it's a great thing. It's really good for this industry, for sure.
So if someone's interested in getting mentorship from people on the council, how do they reach out?
So we have on the NBAA website, there's a section in there under the young professionals area that has a mentor-mentee application. And you submit your application to either be a mentor or a mentee, and you don't have to be on the council to be a mentor. We have people that are just in the industry that have volunteered their time to be a mentor. So basically you apply on there, and then they match you up with a mentor or mentee that's appropriate depending on what you do and what they're after. And that's how it works. It's pretty easy.
Nice. Okay. So I want to be respectful of your time here, but I do want to talk about a couple of your hobbies. You said you like to say that you crash RC aircraft, and funnily enough, basically all my RC aircraft experience, which is very limited, consists of crashing them. So I'm glad to hear that it's not just me. My last RC aircraft, I still don't know where it is because basically I saw it in the distance and that was the last thing I saw. You got your first one when you were 12, and you said you just debuted your first turbine jet. But where would you? I mean, you obviously got started because you loved aircraft. If someone's interested in getting into RC now, what's your advice?
So what I've been telling people, and I've been an instructor for the remote control club that I had that's here in Fort Worth. I used to teach people how to do it on a buddy box, but the way that technology is just such a great thing. There's a simulator called Real Flight. They have a bunch of different, there's like Real Flight Basic, Real Flight 8, and so on. But I recommend to people just to buy Real Flight Basic. There's a transmitter control that plugs into the computer that comes with it. Plug that into your computer. What I tell everybody is fly every single airplane on there. And then when you can land every single one of them proficiently, then go buy a remote controlled airplane, because that simulator gives you the hand-eye coordination that you need to deal with when the airplane's coming at you. The flight controls are reversed. So you have to kind of understand that, and it trains your brain to get used to it. And then you can program wind and all kinds of other stuff into that simulator. And that is the best, because when you wreck on the simulator, it doesn't cost you a dime. You just hit the red reset button and you're back in business. When I was a kid, and I still have a friend who used to have a hobby shop, I would literally wreck an airplane in the morning. I would go to the hobby shop, buy another airframe, throw everything that I had out of the old airplane into the new one. And by that afternoon, I'd have it flying again. So he loved me. I was probably his best customer because I'd come in there every other day buying another airplane kit. But the simulator has definitely made things a lot easier. Technology has gotten tremendously better, where they have safe flight receivers where the airplane will automatically stabilize on its own if you get into a funky configuration, or it won't even let you get into a funky configuration. And then, if you want to get into it, the local flying clubs usually are pretty accommodating. They will teach you, they will put you on the buddy box and let you learn. To be honest with you, I'm still learning with the turbine. It's, I've been flying for this much time, and I still have a lot to learn on this jet. And I will be on a buddy box myself probably for the next couple weeks or couple months, because to fly a jet, you have to have what's called a turbine waiver, and you have to have 3 people sign you off. So, the one thing I always say about aviation is, and this was given to me by one of my mentors, is the day you stop learning is the day you need to get out of aviation. And I'm still learning. My jet is almost ready to be flown. Unfortunately, the weather hasn't been very forgiving here in Fort Worth, and so the maiden was supposed to happen Super Bowl Sunday, and we had gusts up to 20 miles an hour, and I'm just not willing to do that. So she's still sitting in the house ready to go. I run it just about every day just because I'm so excited, but I've yet to put it up in the air. But it should be pretty spectacular when it does.
No doubt. I've seen videos of them flying, and it's pretty amazing. I'd totally forgotten about the real flight simulator, but I actually have one of the controllers somewhere. I'm going to have to dig that out.
And it's great. It is the best tool to learn how to fly these things. I mean, you can't go wrong. And then what I tell people too is, like, if you're going to do that, you get the simulator, you get good at it, then buy like a foamy T-28 or something that's going to be easy and forgiving and not fly too fast. And then just keep working your way up. And that's what I did. I started with the nitro airplanes that run off that really nasty gas that gets all over you. I started with those, and I finally mastered an aerobatic plane. It was an Edge 540. And then I got bored with it because I got to the point where I could just do everything with it, and it was just no fun anymore. So I bought my first electric ducted fan F-18 that goes about 120 miles an hour, and I flew the pants off that airplane. I flew it so hard that it actually stressed the airframe to where it almost broke in midair. It's just it's so much fun when you get good at it, but it's just so hard to get there. But I think the simulator is the bridge. I mean, if you can get good at that, you're going to have a lot of fun with it. So,
okay, let's talk about cars. So I am definitely a car fan. Can't say my knowledge about American muscle is extensive or anything, but you mentioned earlier, you've had a long-standing interest in modifying muscle cars and drag racing as well. Are you still involved in that?
So, not as much. I had a Trans Am Firehawk. I unfortunately barely rear-ended some guy in 2014. And because the car was so rare, they couldn't even find the hood. They totaled my vehicle. I ended up buying it back from the insurance company, and I was going to fix it up. And then I was in the middle of doing all my instrument rating flight training, and I just didn't have time to repair the vehicle or anything. So I ended up selling it to a guy in Dallas who I wish he would let me buy it back, but he won't. But I bought a 2011 Camaro SS, and I traded it in 17 for a 2017 Camaro SS. And the dealership kind of tied my hands down because they gave me a lifetime warranty on the powertrain. So now I'm like, that's great, except that I can't throw a supercharger on there or do anything fun. So, but we're in the middle of beginning a remodel on our house here, and I'm building a metal garage, and I'm going to put a 2-post lift in it and probably buy a welder again and start, kind of doing that stuff at home. And my goal is to buy like a Trans Am Ram Air and put it on the lift and start teaching my oldest son how to work on it. So, just like with everything else, I feel like my knowledge needs to be passed down. So he's going to start learning how to turn a wrench here pretty soon.
And how did you learn originally?
I just started doing it. My parents bought me a 1998 Honda Accord. And I started working on it, doing the brakes and, just doing regular maintenance on it, oil changes and stuff like that. And then when I went down to Florida and I was in the Muscle Car Association, I started doing mods on the Trans Am, like the long tube headers and the nitrous. And I had guys there to help me do it because I didn't know what I was doing. And just through all that and just kind of trial and error, I just basically taught myself. The first time I built the engine in that Trans Am, I did a ton of research online first. The reason I had to do it was because we were racing in Orlando at the quarter-mile track, and I just come off the dyno in Sanford, and we went down to the quarter-mile track to go race on the nitrous because I'd just gotten everything tuned right. and I had a fuel pressure safety switch on my nitrous setup, and it kept cutting out on me. Well, I was probably 70 foot into a run on the drag strip, and my fuel pressure safety switch cut out, and I had 150 shot of nitrous going into the engine, and it bent one of the push rods on the right bank of the engine. So when I got there, this was right before we moved back to Fort Worth, and I tried to pull my car off the 4-wheel trailer that I had behind the 24-foot budget truck. And when I pulled the car off the trailer, it just wasn't running right. And I'd noticed something was wrong with it before we moved, but it was exacerbated by, we drove through a big rainstorm on the way home. My ECU got flooded on the way back. So I had a myriad of problems when I got that airplane, or when I got the car back to, see, I'm still talking about airplanes. When I got the car back to Texas, I realized very quickly I had to do an engine rebuild. So I spent some time researching and learning, looked at people's, guides on the internet and just read as much as I could. And when I finally felt comfortable, I pulled the trigger on all the parts and got a new ECU in there. And then, did my first engine build. I ripped it apart probably 4 times afterwards because I kept changing my mind on different components. But all of those experiences helped me to learn. And now, even today, and I haven't done this in probably 4 years, but I mean, I could tear down an LS1 motor to the short block in probably 40 minutes, So it just took multiple times of trying to trial and error on my own vehicle,
Right. No, that's fascinating. I studied engineering, but I always felt like you learned how things worked in engineering, but you didn't really learn how they worked.
Yeah.
And to do that, you kind of got to do the experimentation you just talked about and take things apart and so on.
It's a bit expensive, but it's definitely fun. It's a journey.
Yeah, no doubt. So we'll wrap up here with a few just quick questions. Mm-hmm. When you think of the word successful, who is the first person that comes to mind and why?
When I think the word successful, I would have to say it's a person I met about 2 years ago within my company. His name is Russ Meyer. And I don't just look at him in success as regard of, career success, but the man has just done amazing things, not just within my company, but some of the charitable organizations that he's, done fundraising for, golf tournaments he's done that he's raised money for charity. I mean, the man is he's successful in every way of his life. And I've had the privilege of having private conversations with him and getting to know him. And he was in Orlando when I got my award from NBAA. And he's just when I think of success, I think of someone who's not just success financially, but they're living their life the way that people should, which is giving back and being charitable, and he is just the epitome of that. So I would have to say Russ Meyer is my vision of success.
Awesome. What is the worst advice you hear being dispensed in the business aviation world?
I've heard some people say, "Oh, just tell the customer that it'll be fine," and if you don't know the answer, just BS your way through it. No, that is about the worst thing I've ever heard. In my experience, what I've found is that if you don't know the answer, you say, "I don't know," and tell them you will figure it out, and then follow through on that promise. The guys that go out there and try to tell their customer one thing that's not true, they're going to find themselves out of the job faster than anyone else in this industry, because the minute you tell a customer something that's not true, or that is just blatantly, not correct, that's the minute you've lost their trust, you've lost their confidence, and then there's no real recovery from that. So the piece of advice that I always give to the younger individuals who are coming up through the organization is, don't ever tell somebody something that you don't know to be fact. If you don't know the answer, it's okay to say you don't know, and just go find it and make sure you communicate that to the customer effectively. So honestly, that's my number one pet peeve with people, is when somebody tells me something and they think they know what they're talking about and they really don't. Because if I take that information to the bank and then it causes me trouble, then obviously, my confidence in them is just, it's gone. So that's the worst thing.
Yeah. And it really is a small industry. Trust matters a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, even with what I've done, which comparatively speaking, my experience is very small. There's so many people in this industry that are so talented and know so much more than I do. I still find myself on a daily basis telling customers, let me find the answer for that. I'm not 100% sure, or, I don't know if I'm right, but let me verify. It's just a constant churn because I'm so hesitant to give the wrong information out. So anyway, I'll stop on that one.
Yeah, no, it is important point to drive home. Last question, which is kind of the opposite. If you had to give a smart, motivated person entering the business aviation world some advice, what would it be?
Oh, I actually gave this advice the other night. Expect a windy road. Don't expect it to be a linear path. Roll with the punches. You're going to encounter some hard times. You're going to encounter some things you don't enjoy. You're going to have to do things that aren't necessarily fun, that are tedious. Just roll with the punches. Keep your eyes on the prize. Keep moving forward. That's my best advice to everyone entering this industry. I mean, just kind of give you a little background. My best friend of 20 years, when I moved back to Texas, he was doing phlebotomy work and I felt bad for him. He just wasn't happy. And, he had been in school to do that, to get his certifications, and he felt like he was in a dead end job. And, I ended up introducing him to Rod, and now he's working at the shop and he's working towards getting his A&P sign off, and he's about to start at Embry-Riddle in his bachelor's degree. And, we talk every day. In fact, he'll probably be at my house here in about an hour. And, I continue to motivate him to keep pressing forward. Don't let these obstacles get in the way. Find ways to knock them down. And then that really is the best advice I can give. It won't be smooth. You're going to hit bumps. My path was so windy, it's just not even funny. And I'm doing great, so I try to let people see what's going on with me and see what I've been through. And the people that have known me like he has for that long, they see what I went through. And I won't lie, there were times when I was so broke, I didn't know if the electricity was going to be on the next week. And, I persevered. I kept going. I let that drive and ambition to be better, keep motivating me. And, so the best thing I can say is just to keep pressing forward and just, take your hits and roll with the punches.
I think that is a fantastic way to end. Thanks so much, Zach. Really enjoyed it. What is the best way for people to reach you?
So I can be found on the Textron Aviation. There's an app. We have a service directory, and my name and face are all there with my contact information. I can also be found on LinkedIn and Facebook, and just search my name, Zach Ungerleider. And I'm happy to meet and talk with anybody who is interested in business aviation or has questions for me. So any one of those avenues is welcomed on my part.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Just a reminder, you can find show notes, links to everything we talked about, and more at leansystems.co/podcast. And I would encourage you to sign up for our email list to make sure you get notified about new blog posts and podcasts. See you next time.